All right, well, welcome Ella. Sofia is a habit coach and a content creator at retrainyourbrain.ca. After sustaining a brain injury at 14 years old, Ella learned how to harness the power of the mind and transition her rock bottom into her breakthrough. Through this process dubbed mental rehabilitation, Ella teaches tactical advice and topics such as habit creation and narrative to help clients make their rock bottom to breakthrough transitions as well. So welcome, Ella.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you everybody for being here. I am so excited. As I mentioned earlier, I love doing these support groups because they're just really casual interactions, and I find that you get more one-on-one time with people, which is always really nice. So I'll probably start by sharing a little bit more about myself, my experience, what my brain injury was, some challenges and deficits that I experienced early on, and then I'll sort of transition into how I personally made that rock bottom to breakthrough transition and some of the tactical tips that I use right now day to day, and hopefully that you guys can implement in your lives as well to learn how to adapt to life post brain injury. So as Claire mentioned, I had a brain injury when I was 14 years old. I'm 27 now, so that was just over 13 years ago. So it was January 10th, 2008, actually. And what happened was I had an AVM rupture in my cerebellum. So for those of you who don't know, an AVM stands for arterial venous malformation, a mouthful. And basically what it means is, in lay people's terms, because I am not a scientist, we have arteries and veins that are supposed to come together via tiny little blood vessels called capillaries, guess depends where you're from. And these little blood vessels are supposed to regulate the flow of blood, the pressure. And mine didn't form right. So they kind of formed in this big clump of vessels, and that is called a nidus. And so if you can picture similar to a balloon, where you blow up a balloon and the more air goes into it, it gets bigger and bigger. This nidus, the more that blood was pumping and pumping my whole life, it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger until one day it just couldn't handle the pressure and it ruptured. And so that occurred in my cerebellum, right in the back of my brain there. And it caused actually 2 strokes. And so initially, I had a lot of maybe standard sort of deficits and impairments that people go through. So I was in a walker. I actually had left side weakness all the way throughout. I didn't have any paralysis. I was very lucky, but I did have left side weakness. So everything from my speech to my eyesight to my movements were all affected. So I was in a walker for a bit. My speech was probably the worst thing that I still noticed to this day, mostly because I talk a lot. And so it's easy for me to pick up on when I'm having problems pronouncing a word or if I'm reading a word incorrectly. So the cerebellum, for those of you who don't know, controls coordination. I think the sort of traditional understanding of the cerebellum was that it controls your balance, which is true, but it controls your coordination, and that's just not physical coordination. So that does fall under things, or over things, I guess, as an umbrella, including your balance, and just physically coordinating yourself in space, but it also includes coordination of your emotions and coordination of your thoughts. So some of the other things that I have a little bit more difficulty with now, outside of speech and reading, sometimes I'll switch letters, switch words, but I also sometimes have trouble with instructions. So when I have a list of, say, directions or instructions on how to do something, they might be listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I know it goes from 1 to 5. But for some reason, it just takes a little bit more time to process how exactly to go from 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 4, and so on. So that's something that I've been working on as well. So I kind of listed the physical and cognitive changes or deficits that I experienced post stroke, but the biggest impact and the biggest loss that I had was a loss of my identity. So pre-stroke, and I know I was young, but I felt like I was one of those kids that with a lot of gusto, and I figured it all out early. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I was good at. So I was obsessed with math, and I was just a really quick thinker. And I didn't have time for English or grammar or anything that didn't have to do with simple black and white thinking. And I was also an athlete. So I was an avid competitive soccer player, and I wanted to make it to the big leagues. And then when my stroke happened, I lost those things. So all of a sudden, my processing just slowed right down. And at the time, because I was so young, and also maybe because education around brain injuries was not what it is today, I just didn't understand the gravity of what happened to me. And I didn't realize that I felt like a different person with slower processing because could be because of this brain injury that I had. So I just honestly thought I was losing it and that for some reason I was a stupid person or I'm going to be very blunt. Um, I wasn't smart and I was slow. I had no idea this could have been caused because of a brain injury that I had. So regardless, I knew I had lost all these things and it really, as maybe a lot of you have battled with or continue to battle with, sent me into a really deep depression, a low mood, very, very low mood. And I spent so much time trying to get this old identity back, trying to fit into this old version of myself. I spent years, about 9.5 to 10 years doing it before I finally made my breakthrough transition. And in hindsight, I don't have any regrets or wish anything differently. But I look back and I think, oh my gosh, I spent so much time trying to fit into this old identity or version of myself. And every time I tried to do that, I was giving up the opportunity to create a new version of myself, a new and better version with all the tools I had at my disposal. So if I'm going to say anything tonight that's important, that is probably one of the most important things. Don't give up the opportunity to create a new version of yourself by trying to fit into an old version. And I think I'll share a quote as well, that demonstrates that point. And it's by Jim Quick. If anybody knows who that is, he is a brain coach and he coaches a lot of celebrities, Will Smith being one of them. And he helps them memorize their lines and such. I think I must have his book somewhere back here, my bookshelf. And the quote that he said was, "Your label is your limit." And when he said that, I was like, whoa, that is so true. Because I had labeled myself as whatever pre stroke Ella, pre brain injury Ella was. And I was trying to fit back into that label, not realizing I was limiting all of my opportunities to become a better version of myself. And you certainly don't have to have a brain injury or a stroke to sort of impose these limitations on yourself. I think it's easy for us to get caught up in what our identities are and lose sight of all the new things that we can do and we can create in our lives. And that's really the beauty of being human is that we can do so many different things. Oh wow. If you guys saw me, you would have just saw me try and use my fingers to scroll up on my page, thinking it's like an my phone, but that is not gonna happen. I just have some little notes here that I'm taking a look at. So yeah, I mentioned I had spent so much time trying to get back this old version of me. And I think one of the main reasons I did that was yes, I lost my identity, but also because the way recovery is defined. I'll use the word defined. So maybe a lot of you have had this experience as well. We can talk about that. Oh, by the way, I'll just do a quick interrupt myself. If you have any questions as I'm speaking, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be taking a look at the chat and I'm happy to stop and answer while I'm talking. You don't have to wait to the end. I just want to let you guys know that. So yeah, so how the recovery is defined. So growing up, I had all these, visits to the neurologists and doctors and neuro everything. And one of the main questions I was always asked was, on a scale of 0 to 100%, how recovered do you feel? And eventually I got to a point where I felt that I was 99% recovered, but I'd never be 100% again. And at the time, I thought that was completely realistic. And of course, there's a way you can interpret that that makes complete sense. Um, but over time, the more I repeated that, I'm 99% recovered and I'm never going to be 100% again, I started focusing on that 1% I was never going to gain back. And the more I focused on it, the more my mood just got lower and lower and lower. And when I realized that I am not, I don't even know who I was comparing myself to, then I started to change my definition of recovery a little bit. So basically, I was saying I'm never going to be 100% of pre-stroke Ella. And the fact is, I would never be 13-year-old Ella again, whether or not I had a stroke. The fact is, I'm 27-year-old Ella right now, and I have no idea what 27-year-old Ella who never had a brain injury looks like. I have no idea what her skills are like. I have no idea what her weaknesses and strengths are like. I don't know what her speech would be like. I don't know anything because that is a fictional Ella. She does not exist. This is a sort of Ella that sits on a pedestal in my mind, and I kept on comparing to her. She's 100%, and what I am was 99%. And then when I realized, oh, that's not a real Ella, that when I changed my definition of recovery. And so now what I say is, as long as I wake up every single day and I put in 100% effort into what I have to do that day, that means I am 100% recovered. Um, And when I started doing that, my mood went right back up, and I was a lot more happier with the version of myself now. And I was able to recognize the new opportunities and the new things that I could do as 27-year-old Ella post stroke. So what else? Maybe I'll just stop, ask if you guys have any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask right now. If not, I'll just keep talking and sharing. I'm like an encyclopedia of the amount of information that's in my head. No questions so far. Okay, so what else do you want to share? So I'll talk about sort of my rock bottom to breakthrough transition. And there was really a pivotal moment that if you guys have watched some of my videos, maybe just in preparation for this, you might have heard me talk about this moment. But for anybody who hasn't, I think it's really important to share. So although this sort of rock bottom to transition that I made was pretty gradual, as I think most things are, you got to go step by step, and there's downs and there's ups. And eventually you just get to the other side and you're like, holy crap, I'm here. Like I did it. How did I even do it? Because it took so long and took so many steps. That's kind of the beauty of it. But at the same time, I did have one sort of really pivotal moment in my life that happened, and I just didn't look back, and I'm going to share that with you. So after 9.5 years post brain injury, that's finally when I first started talking about all these thoughts that I had been repressing in my head to actually a manager at work. As I mentioned, I didn't have an education or an understanding of the gravity of what had happened to me. So I just figured I was stupid, and this had nothing to do with that thing that happened to me when I was 14. I'm just not meant to be on this earth. Those were the kinds of thoughts I was having. And I kept on repressing them and repressing them, and they just kept getting worse and worse until finally they started really affecting me at work, and I was crying all the time, to the point where I couldn't even hold in my tears long enough to be by myself or get home. I was just crying in front of other people. So I figured, okay, something has to stop here. So sat down with the manager one day and just sort of word vomited everything that I'd been holding in for like the past 9.5 years. And it ended up kind of bringing me to where I am here. Now, that said, I felt a lot more confident about what had happened to me in terms of my brain injury. And I understood and started to research a little bit more about my deficits and how the brain works, and kind of ask my doctors more questions and become more educated in that regard. But something I still didn't know how to manage was my emotions and my understanding that life is still going to go up and down. I figured, okay, now I talked about my brain injury, I'm feeling good. Life is just going to keep going up from here. And then, as per usual, life doesn't always just go up. It went down, and I figured, okay, what's going on? What's wrong with me? I'm still not doing something right. And so that depression just kept getting worse and worse, unfortunately. Now, fast forward. So that was the beginning of 2017. So fast forward about 6 months, I got to the point where my suicidal thoughts started turning into suicidal beliefs. I don't know if anybody here has ever thought or experienced, live with any of these things. I know, just speaking to people, suicidal thoughts are a lot more common than I think we all individually think, and that's fine. We should be talking about these things to professionals. Um, but I think the difference between thoughts and beliefs is really important to distinguish. To be totally blunt, I think there was a time. I think somebody might, and I was one of these people, so maybe I'll just speak for myself. Is probably the best thing to do. There was a time where I thought about killing myself and taking my life without actually believing that that's a thing that I should do. It was sort of an in the moment thing, but I knew it would pass. And then there got to a point where the depression was so low that those thoughts now turned into beliefs. So no matter what my mood was like, happy or sad, I still believed that that was something that I should do. And so, unfortunately or fortunately, I tried it one time, and that was at the end of 2017. And long story short, I had the first responders show up to my apartment, and I was still fully conscious at this time, but I wouldn't let them in. And now I'm pretty much so hysterical because I can't believe this is happening. And I'm me. I'm Ella. I'm supposed to be successful and doing all these good things, but here I am in this situation. And so at the time, I went and scurried off into the bathroom of my tiny little apartment, which was actually at the time in Ottawa. And all of a sudden, they say, if you don't open the door, we're going to break it down. And so I'm standing in the bathroom and I'm just hysterical. And sure enough, they break down this door. And in that moment, I thought I reached my rock bottom. That moment right there, that was the absolute worst I ever felt. And it was after that moment that all of a sudden I made this transition. And I knew that I had to start making changes in my life to better myself. And the reason I felt so low in that moment was because there were these people busting down my apartment door to stop me from doing something I had 100% control over. 100%. Nobody was making me make the decisions I'd made my entire life. That was all me. And it was my mind. And so if my mind could put me in a situation like that, I knew my mind could take me out. And so it was that pivotal moment where I reached my breakthrough, and I realized from this point forward, I'm going to be so dedicated to using my mind, the power of my mind, to implement tactical techniques and solutions to risk manage my life and risk manage my mind. Um, and so, what time is it? Oh, okay. So I'll explain a little bit about risk management. Maybe before I do, again, I'll just ask. Sometimes people don't ask questions until I actually pause and ask you for questions. So I'll just do that one more time. And by the way, you don't have to speak up even if you don't have a question. If you just want to share something personal or something resonated with you so far, you can definitely share that as well. It doesn't have to be a question. No. I'll wait in silence and then it'll get awkward. Okay, no problem. Awesome. So what I'll do then is I'll explain risk management, and then I will ask you guys some questions and kind of spice it up a little bit. Okay, so I said something important there at the end. I said I was trying to, or being in my breakthrough, sort of living in this breakthrough moment, I had to learn how to risk manage my mind and risk manage my life. So what does that mean? So back when I was doing my master's at the University of Waterloo, I chose to do it, and it was a master's of arts in sociology, but I had intentions of going to law school, and so I had an interest in security. And so my research focus ended up being on security, specifically physical security, and I wrote a paper on security in Canadian airports, in risk management and security. And in this paper, I talked about how security went from, particularly security in airports, went from this risk avoidance model to a more risk management model. So if you think about an airport, and an example of risk avoidance with security in an airport might be, okay, we know that somebody might try to come into this airport and set off a bomb. That is a huge risk. That could be a threat, and we want to avoid it at all costs. We do not want that happening. We want to protect the airport, and we want to protect the people. And so what a security team might implement in that case is a few security tactics to avoid that happening. Number one could be something called tiger traps out in the parking lot. So this way, if a car is driving and it has something heavy in there, it'll fall into the ground. Another risk avoidance tactic would be having everybody at the very first doors having a metal detector at all the doors going into the airport. So this way you can't even get in without being checked. Those are some things that are risk avoidance tactics or techniques. Now, those are great, but when you have something like an airport, that takes up a lot of time, and costs a lot of money, it's a lot of resources, and there are just a lot of variables that makes risk avoidance not very realistic. At the same time, when you're so focused on avoiding one type of risk, sometimes you don't even realize that there are other risks that can sneak up on you. And so risk management is a bit of a different technique where the airport security team might say, okay, one of the risks that might actually happen is somebody coming in with a bomb. Instead of trying to avoid it completely, we'll implement a few things that can deter and or avoid this from happening. But if it does happen, because it might, what can we do after the fact to be resilient? And that means, what can we do after the fact to recover as quickly as possible to be a functioning airport again? And so some of those techniques might be building an airport with shatterproof glass, or building it with a certain type of material that can withstand a larger explosion and is fairly inexpensive to fix or replace. Those are some risk management techniques. And so I was going through and writing this paper, and I realized, oh my gosh, I have been spending my entire life risk avoiding in my life, risk avoiding negativity in my life, when I need to be risk managing my life instead. Because at the end of the day, we cannot control the things that happen to us. You know, we're all in this room sharing one negative thing that happened to us, and that was a brain injury. Some of us had it certain ways, and some of us sustained it other ways, but we're all here together for that reason. And I don't think we could control that. But what can we do now? So when something happens to me that challenges me, or I'm faced with one of my deficits or things that lingers from my brain injury, what I ask myself is, what can I do now to recover as quickly as possible and become a functioning version of Ella again? And so that has really been such a game changer, a brain changer for me, and turning my rock bottom into my breakthrough. So yeah, I'll do it again. Any questions? No? Okay, so I'm gonna kind of look at my little list of questions. Oh, I accidentally hit a button. And let's see if I can ask some of you guys questions. So, and of course, if you're oh, how have your family supported you? Linda, great question. Um, okay, so let's answer that. The question was, how has my family supported me through this? So first and foremost, I have to say I have an awesome family. So my mom and my dad and my sister. And I have a fantastic extended family as well. Really very supportive, and we're all very close. I'm very lucky in that regard. Um, Now we're very supportive when they needed to be my caretakers when I was at home and going through all the physical rehab. And then after the physical rehab ended, and this is why I use the word mental rehab, because after physical rehab ended, it was like, okay, you're recovered, you're good. And nobody had educated my family or me, but nobody had educated my parents, so I was just a child at the time, on the mental effects that could happen post brain injury. And so they were really doing everything that they thought they could and should be doing, um, without realizing, oh, maybe we should actually be, dragging her reluctantly to a psychologist, just like we dragged her to PT and OT. Because that PT, OT, speech pathology, those are really standard parts of recovery. I know those are a standard part of my recovery. But for some reason, neuropsychology, or going to see a mental health professional, was not a standard part of recovery. And so they really did everything that they could. And I think that, I put on a smiling and happy face, even though I had all these negative thoughts inside. And it wasn't until I had that moment at the end of 2017 where everything sort of came out and all these negative thoughts came out because there was that incident that I had, where they were like, oh my gosh, we just want you to communicate with us. And from now on, please communicate these things with us. And we are going to be as supportive as I can. So I think when that happened, yeah, they've been really, really great. And I think just like caregivers have a responsibility to care for us, um, we as patients, I don't even want to use that, we as survivors have a responsibility to communicate with caregivers as well. Because unfortunately they can't read our minds. Nobody can read anybody's mind. And I think in order to save my pride, I kind of lived with that thought that I'll just wait till somebody kind of fixes it for me or reads my mind and knows that I'm sad. But I do have a responsibility to communicate with them. And now that I am, things have been really, really good. We all support each other now. Um, so I got another question asking about what are some more tips to be resilient. Very good question. So there are lots of things that you can do. I sort of crafted a few different techniques that you can implement in your life. So the names of them are like personal growth loop, habit formula, and narrative is a big one. And what's the last one? Oh, who's the one I was just going to explain? I forget. Wow. I don't think that was a brain injury moment. I think that was just me forgetting. Okay, so self-care recipe. That's the one I'll explain first. So as I mentioned, the meaning of resilience is to recover quickly after you get knocked down. I think a lot of people confuse resilience or conflate resilience with other terms that are similar but not the same. So I hear a lot of people using the word resilience instead of perseverance. Or what's another one? Just adapting instead of being resilient. And those are all very similar terms, but they're not the same. So again, resilience is your ability to recover as quickly as possible to be a functioning version of yourself again. Okay. And so the one tip that I work on with people is called the self-care recipe. And so how that works is just like a recipe for a cake or anything else that you like to make, you're going to create a recipe for a functioning version of you. And I think this is important because a lot of times, especially when I was going through my really dark phases, people were saying, you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. You have to learn how to step outside your comfort zone and be okay with that. And I know I knew I had to do that, but I felt like I was doing it for so long and it wasn't working. I didn't know what else to do. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't even have a comfort zone to step out of. I didn't even know what a functioning version of Ella looked like. Again, because I had been spending so much time trying to be 14-year-old pre-stroke Ella. I had no idea what a functioning version of 27-year-old Ella looked like. And so I shut off the social media and just kind of looked inwardly, and I figured that out. And so some things that would be in your self-care recipe, or you can call it your comfort zone recipe, would be things like, how much sleep do you need to be a functioning version of yourself? And what does that look like? What time do you go to sleep? Is it later on? Do you sleep in? Do you sleep on a certain side of the bed? Do you like all your sleeping and waking habits? What sort of food and what does your diet look like? In order for you to be happy? Do you have any food intolerances? Like, what makes you feel good? What makes you feel happy after you eat? And not just immediately, like after eating cookies, long term. What makes you maintain a healthy weight? What sort of things do you need to say to yourself to stay happy? So your self-talk habits. What sort of ways do you need to be with people? Are you introverted? Are you extroverted? Gosh, there are probably about 6 different types of things, and you can tailor underneath them your individual ingredients for your recipe. And so, like sleeping and waking habits, I like to call them organizational habits, organizing time and organizing space. I think that's important. Focus on learning habits. Like how do you focus? How do you learn? How do you need to be in a quiet room? Do you need to listen to music in the background? Does it change? What do you like to learn? What do you enjoy? What do you read? These are all the things I like to read. What do you like? What are your hobbies? What are all the things that make you happy? So then um, focus on learning, time filler habits. So what do you do when you're bored? What do you gravitate towards? Eating and physical health, which we went over, and then lastly is communication and mental health. And those are sort of the 6 areas, and you can tailor your ingredients underneath them. And when you figure that out, every time you're feeling off or your mood's feeling down or it's not feeling a good version of yourself, you can literally look at that physical list that you either wrote down on paper or you typed up on your computer or your phone and printed it out, and you can see, okay, am I getting enough sleep? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? And if you're not doing all those things, then you know you're not doing all the things that you need to be doing to be a functioning version of yourself. And that self-care recipe or a comfort zone recipe, whatever you want to call it, has been probably one of the best tactical and easy to implement tools that I use all the time. I literally have this book right here, and every single day I track, like literally track all the things that I know I need to be doing. And this month has been bad. You see that not everything has been filled out, or whatever month that was. That was November, actually. Maybe it was no bad month. But yeah, it's a really easy way of figuring that out. I can go through another tip how to be resilient if anybody doesn't have any other questions so far. Or again, you don't even have to ask a question. If something has resonated with you so far or you want me to repeat something, feel free to unmute yourself and you can go for it. No, nothing. No problem. Let's see if I can ask you guys some questions. Gosh, any questions I asked might be a little,
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could you please repeat the quote that you had and tell me the name of the person whose book you had mentioned?
Yes, definitely. Okay, thank you so much for that. I have the book behind me and I will even show it to you. It is right. Oh, not there. Not there. Oh man. Shoot. I'm gonna get it. Okay, maybe I won't. Okay, maybe I need to reorganize my books to make them easier to find, but what I'll do is I'll type the name in the chat. So, let's see, everybody. Jim.
Can you see the chat?
Limitless. So the book is called Limitless and it's by Jim Quick. And the quote is, "Your label is your limit." And I'll write that down too. And I just thought it was wonderful. Your label is your limit. Oh, I didn't spell limit right. But your label is your limit. And gosh, yeah, I couldn't have said it more better myself. I think it's so true. And actually I have a YouTube video. It's up on the front page of my website and on my YouTube channel. It's my first video. Some of you might have seen it, some of you may have not. And in it, the video is called 5 Reasons My Brain Injury Helped Me Live My Life. And reason number 3 or 4, I think, is you are not a plastic bag, which essentially means you are not a one-use item, like a plastic bag, one-use plastic item. Humans are not one-use plastic bags. You have so many different uses and so many different things you can do. There's no reason to label or fit yourself into just one thing when really the world is at our fingertips. And so I hope that's helpful. I highly recommend Jim Quick's book. He has been really helpful in my life. Could you repeat? Let's see, could you repeat could I repeat the suggestions that I mentioned? Those suggestions as far as the self-care recipe and how to be resilient. I can definitely do that. If you're referring to something different, then yep, okay, perfect. And Donna asked, do I have a worksheet for the recipe? So yes, what I can do after, so I'll repeat it, and then what I could do afterwards is actually send out a worksheet that I have with some of this information that I've been talking about. I'll send it to Claire, and then she can sort of disseminate. So this way you guys actually have everything written down, and you don't need to worry about rewatching the video and trying to take notes and stuff. You'll have it right there with you. So the self-care recipe. There are sort of six types of habits. And again, your individual ingredients can fall under those. And the way I remember them is actually using a technique called the mind palace, where essentially to remember something, you visualize it and you put it in a place. And so these 6 types of habits, they actually spell it an acronym, SOFTEC, SOFTEC. And if anybody is familiar or skates, plays hockey or figure skating, you might know that SOFTEC is a brand of skates. They're made by a certain company. And so what I do is I actually picture myself wearing skates and skating around, slipping and sliding and like falling because I'm not a good skater. Trying not to hit them. And that visual helps me remember the acronym SOFTEC, which will then help me remember the 6 types of habits. So I'll list them out for you now. So S, we have sleeping and waking habits, because we all need to sleep and we all need to wake up. We just have different versions of what that looks like for each of us. And then there's organizational habits. So how do you organize your space and how do you organize your time? And then there's focus and learning habits. So how do you zone in on tasks and what do you enjoy learning? Are you spending enough time there? Time filler habits. What do you do when you have nothing to do? What do you gravitate towards when you're bored? And then there is eating and physical health habits. Again, so we all need to be doing these things. It just looks differently for each of us. And then after eating and physical health habits, the last one is communication and mental health habits. So how do you communicate with others? How do you communicate with yourself? And that's why I lumped it in with mental health. And so those are the 6 types of umbrellas of habits, if you will, and you can analyze them and figure out what works for you and how to tailor those things to your lifestyle, keeping in mind that they will probably change over the years and you'll probably have to adapt based on your situation, and that's fine. So the next question is, what are you using as your habit logging book? Super question. So I have a lot of journals. They are kind of behind me. I'm gonna actually get them because I see them right here. So here are some of the journals I've been using over the past 2 or so years. And I use them every single day. And the way I've been using them has changed slightly. Actually, it's changed probably more than slightly. To accommodate my lifestyle, really. And so I started off using this journal right here, which is a dotted journal. I find having the dots in the journals versus having lines, it just makes it more fun for me. I personally like to be a little bit creative, so I'll show you an example. I like to draw. And it's not like one of my super duper talents, but I enjoy it. And so when I have some extra time on my hands, I'll do a little bit of that. And so this right here was actually my very first journal slash agenda. And the way I used it, if you look up bullet journaling on like Pinterest or Google or pretty much anywhere because it's so popular now, you'll find the sort of outline that I was using for this. And one of the things that I did, so when it came to writing down daily agenda, I pretty much, it looked like an agenda book, just a little bit more funky and personalized. One of the other things that I did in here was a habit tracker, which I don't use in the same way. I'll show you the new way I use it, but you can see this was my habit tracker for 1 month on the side here. And so literally I was supposed to highlight all the days I did these things. And this would be days 1 through, only 21 days. So whatever month that was for. So that's how I did that there. And then I also did something called a mood tracker. Let me see if I can find one for you. I know there's a few in here. Basically, a mood tracker, you can set it up again any which way you like, and it tracks your mood, just like that, to see if there are any patterns, how often you're actually sad. Because one thing I noticed is I thought, oh, I'm sad all the time, and I'm always in a crummy mood, but that wasn't the case because I started tracking my mood, and I realized I was actually spending more time being happy than I thought. I was just focusing on the sad times. So I can't find her now. So in order to save time, I won't keep flipping through. So yeah, I was using a dotted journal for like the next 2, or these are the same. And then this one right here is actually my all-time favorite journal. It's a dotted journal and the brand is called Dingbats. Oh, it's backwards, but it's Dingbats journal. And they are just, if you're super into journaling like me, this is by far my favorite. The one I'm using right now, honestly, is just like a cheap little journal that I got in a pack of 2 for like $5 each on Amazon, and I just typed in dotted journal, and it's just like this little spring binded journal, and yeah, that's what I use for everything. And then as far as figuring out how to track things, let me show you this past month. There we go. So what I track now is I like to track my weight. I know people say, oh my God, you weigh yourself like every day. First of all, don't weigh yourself every single day, maybe every other day. But the reason I do it is because it's helpful, not necessarily looking at I don't really look at the number, but it helps me understand when I'm eating too much or eating too little. So I'm an eater. I eat a lot. I love food. And so when I'm sort of stuffing my face very gluttonly, I don't know what the word is for that, gluttonous. And then I hop on the scale and I see, oh, that number is a little bit high. It makes me think of my eating habits. Okay, am I actually putting into my body what my body wants? And so that's why I track my weights. And then I track my exercise. And then I track my eating window. So I do intermittent fasting. And then I track if I do one of my focus and learning habits is Croatian, because that's my background. And every day I do a little Croatian lesson. And then I also track whether I read, and I track my sleep as well, what time I went to sleep, and how many hours of sleep that I got. And that's a big one, sleep, because sometimes I can look back and see, oh, wow, I've been sleeping way too much and my mood has been down. So I need to look at that self-care recipe again and see if I'm missing anything. That was a good question. Any other questions? Because I went right up to almost at that hour mark. Has anybody else implemented any sort of self-care or any tools that have helped you, not even just post brain injury, but just in your life in general with improving your mood on a day-to-day basis? Or even, it doesn't even have to be like specific tools, things that you do. You paint, 'cause I'm looking at that painting back there.
I would say something. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay, so bear with me. One thing I've had a couple brain injuries, so I'm not referring to current tense because I'm still working on that. But I found what made a huge difference originally was like acceptance. And I've listened to what you said, like kind of like literally just kind of taking and this is who I am. And working with that and self-awareness, actually, because when you become aware of how things affect you, then you can try other things. Whereas if you keep trying to do things the way you know how to do it, you just keep banging your head against a wall. As the other thing I wanted to say, and I'm maybe not approaching this well, so just bear with me. I find that I call it like mental weight training. So obviously, if you're not aware that you're having a thought, then you obviously can't deal with that. But if you become aware that you're having a negative thought, you start out by, even if you don't feel it, you give it a positive. It doesn't matter if you don't feel that way. And then you keep doing that. And then over time, you try doing it with more than one thing. And yeah, it's work. And no, it's not perfect. But I've found it kind of, even though on the surface, sometimes my body language and my frustrations and everything might appear to people, I'm not in that negative. I do, to the most part, except maybe in that moment, I do to the most part have like a positive outlook, and I'm able to kind of do that and stuff. So I don't know. It's just some things that I've found that have helped. But
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Self-awareness is a really, really good one. It's a good term to use. What's the one? Meditation. Mindfulness is something that comes to mind when you said that. Mindfulness practices, self-awareness. I think that's really cool. I'm certainly not an expert, so maybe you're like, those are not the same thing. But that's a really great tip. Thank you for sharing. was it you said something and something else came, oh, I remember. You said something along the lines of, it's like it takes hard work, it's not going to happen right away, something like that. If
Yeah,
you
you
can
have to have
remember.
grace for yourself. I don't remember what I said, but I know you have to have grace for yourself, because yeah, you're gonna have times it works and times it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I really appreciate you saying that, because it takes a long time and it takes hours, and self care, and because we have so many distractions in our world today, it's hard to know ourselves and to be self-aware. It's a skill, really. Um and I think I didn't realize that until I had that sort of breakthrough moment. I just thought it was loving life was supposed to come naturally. And, for some people, might come much more naturally than to others. For me, it was hard. And I didn't realize that I had to build up certain skills to be able to do that. Just like anything that you want to be good at, if you want to be good at painting, sports, physical rehab, anything that you want to do, it will take hours, but you will recover. And it's going to take hard work, but then once you get once you start consistently doing those things, they're going to get easier and easier over time because you've built up habits. Something that I didn't talk about too much tonight, but that's okay because I love doing these questions. So I think, oh, another one. Awesome. Oh, implementing downtime still works. Yes, implementing downtime. I heard something recently. If you guys know what love languages are, they're like the if you haven't, I guess they're essentially the language that you like to receive love in and give love in. And when I say language, I don't mean actual language. There are 4 different types or 5 different types. And if anybody actually knows them better than I do, please help me, because quality time, I know that's one because that's mine. Um, Physical touch is one, acts of service, and then there's 2 others or something, I believe, but they're all different ways that you show and like to receive love. And I heard something recently that said not only is that a way for you to show love to somebody else, but whatever your love language is, that's a way for you to show love to yourself. So, for example, my love language is quality time. And part of my self care recipe then is to spend time with myself. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not showing myself the type of love that I want to see. So, if you guys haven't, oh, there we are. Rebecca just put it in the chat section. Yes, words of affirmation, gift giving. Yes. So, there's all of the love languages there. So, if you know what your love language is, ask yourself, are you using it on yourself? Are you showing yourself the type of love that you resonate with? And then we had one more comment here. Pacing is one technique to help me make it through the day. Yes, similar to downtime. That's actually similar to something else I use. It's called the 80% rule. Actually, you tell me if this sounds similar to you, to pacing. So my idea of pacing is kind of like putting 80% output for most of the time, because then my output can be sustainable in the long term, and I'll have enough energy left over so that if a day comes and I need to exert myself 100%, I'll be able to do that. So that's sort of my 80% rule, and that might be what pacing is to you, but if it's not, please share.
I'm just going to stop the recording, and people can feel free to unmute themselves and show their videos if they want to ask questions as well. So I'd just like to thank you again so much for answering all these questions and teaching us a little bit more about habits.
Yeah, of course, Claire. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I love meeting